Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us as we enter season 3 of the Activist Lawyer Podcast. I'm joined today by Jack.
Hello everyone.
Hi Jack, thanks for...
I know who thought we would be here, season 3.
Thanks for joining me. You're always here. So yeah, I know, season 3, it's so fantastic, but I'm very rusty, as you can probably tell.
I know it took us a while into the 2022 to get started.
It did. Well, we did intend to start a lot earlier, but with old COVID being around, cancellations, I think getting into the swing of things after Christmas, and I'm just kind of back really from
people working away, they
yeah.
don't really have time. So yeah,
you're saying people weren't making time for us?
No, just people are actually doing work now instead of during COVID, the time to discuss things.
That's true. Well, different times, and very, very, very different times that we're living in now. Yeah. So obviously at the start of every episode, we like to do a little bit of an introduction. So we would like to round up last year's recordings as well, which were just fantastic. Class, yeah. And we are so excited for the year ahead. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But really, we can't avoid talking about the awful, horrendous, unfolding tragedy in the Ukraine, particularly because it's really affecting our work as well here at Granite Immigration Law. Jack and I, as some of you may know, work in an immigration law firm, so we are just trying to get to grips with a lot of the information that's coming out, particularly around visas for the UK and, of course, the resettlement to Ireland. So we'll touch on that a little bit, but as we record this, I guess things will change.
Probably changing right now.
Overnight.
While
so
we're speaking.
It's such an awful time, a traumatizing time for many of our clients as well. Even there, we've just received a number of calls from them worried about family members and trying to get them over to Ireland. So, but at the beginning of this recording, I think we checked 500,000 people have fled the Ukraine since Russia's invasion began. Wasn't it the 24th?
24th, so only what, 6 days?
6 days into it, I think. And this number is expected to rise massively. So that's what we're really preparing for. This is really just the tip of the iceberg, according to a lot of the agencies on the ground. So we've been working with clients, as I said, trying to advise on options open to their family members to come to Ireland and the UK. Because of where we're based here on the border in Uri, we've kind of been receiving queries about, I suppose, the island of Ireland itself.
Yeah.
And, you know, what's more practicable for clients and what's the best solution for them. But I have to say, lawyers have been amazing. You've probably seen it too, Jack, all
over social media. Trying to do the best they can.
Absolutely.
Because it's very easy to feel helpless here, especially because it's constantly updating and people feel like once I make a decision here, tomorrow it'll be totally different. So I think they're trying to do the best they can. You can see that all over social media. And
for us at the weekend, I mean, we had a good enough understanding of the visa process. The UK's horrendous kind of attitude towards this. But anyway, we'll get back to that. With Ireland opening things up massively and saying like the Ukrainian people arriving in Ireland would not be required to have a visa, which was obviously fantastic. But the problem was logistics. And I, for one, couldn't figure out, you know, what's happening on the ground, behind the scenes. How do they get here once the flights have been closed off? Our clients were in Odessa, so Moldova was the best place for them to go. But how were they going to get there? A lot of them were elderly, sick, vulnerable. They had to leave their sons who would have supported them behind because they were over 18 and had to stay to fight. Meanwhile, their relatives are in Northern Ireland here, absolutely just in an awful state, a really awful state. So we've been dealing with clients like that over the weekend, and we're keeping a real close eye. But it's good to know that a lot of lawyers, and there's a group of us here in Northern Ireland, will be working together to provide free advice where we can to Ukrainian citizens and anybody who's worried about loved ones abroad and getting them over here. So check in with us about that. But really, I suppose what we were planning to talk about anyway, as we opened this season, was the Nationality and Borders Bill. And I know we'd Maria McCluskey in before, and she spoke about it at length and how it would impact children, because she works with the Children's Law Centre in Northern Ireland. But the crisis in the Ukraine has really shed light on this whole bill, I suppose. And it's the Home Office's horrendous attempt to, I don't know, create really barbaric system. Well, in their eyes, it would be
a two-tiered system.
A two-tiered system, but in their eyes, I guess it's this, a more efficient system and a way of controlling immigration. But really, it allows for the complete differential treatment of refugees, depending on how they reached Britain. So I think it's clauses. People, depending on how you get here, you're put into a clause, as you say, a two-tiered approach. So those who arrive with visas or what do they call it? It's a government-approved route will be granted all of the benefits of coming to the UK under, a normal a visa scheme.
Yeah, and as we can see in Ukraine now, which is the most recent example, I don't think many people have much time to apply for an approved route when they're fleeing for their lives, and you can see that in many different countries as well.
Yeah, I mean, arriving irregularly, which is what they want to stop, and those cases will be deemed inadmissible, so kind of automatically refused. And actually, those people are called illegal if they have arrived individually. And what that means is either by lorry or by boat. So in other words, not an approved government route. Now, it's absolutely ridiculous, but thankfully last night I was watching it unfold. The House of Lords debated this, and I think it's the first round of debates before it goes back to the House of Commons for approval. And of course we have the fantastic Lord Alf Dubs and his colleagues who really just went full throttle against the Home Office in this, which is fantastic. And they actually rejected a number of clauses in the bills. One of them was that, what we just mentioned, the criminality of refugees who arrive under an irregular route and not under a government approved route. So that suffered a massive defeat. And I mean, people are deeming it as a victory for refugees and for the people of Britain, who in many surveys do not want this. And I know Northern Ireland, I think you sent me did a survey recently, and people do not support this bill. No. It's absolutely draconian. So really, I think there were 4 defeats in the House of Lords last night, which hopefully will impact matters when it goes back to the House of Commons. Now, they can either accept those changes or challenge it. But I think when people realise what would happen if Ukrainian refugees, seeing what's happening close to us, arrive in the UK and are treated as they would be under this bill, having their rights completely restricted and really being deemed inadmissible and illegal. Yeah. I mean, that just speaks volumes. So in one way, at least this is really highlighting, the Home Office's intended, changes for the immigration system and the asylum system in the UK. Now, there's other things in there as well. The citizenship, Jack, is one
so clause 9. So even speaking to people up at university and stuff, their friends and family, some friends and family, once that announcement came out about clause 9, they were actually pretty worried about it already, and because they don't know what's coming down the line. But for anybody who doesn't know, clause 9 of the bill may give the government the right to deprive people with British citizenship. They'll be able to take their citizenship off them without informing them
without
first.
Notice.
Yeah, without notice. Okay. And I think the example of why they couldn't give them notice is for national security, and if it's impractical, to let them know. Yeah, so which I don't know how they can justify that, or what will the threshold be for being impractical to let them know.
Of course, this would affect thousands. There are figures. I'm not 100% sure of the figures, but this would affect people not only in the UK but across the world potentially. And thankfully rejected again in the House of Lords and widely debated. So we'll see how that goes, but to just strip someone of their citizenship, and normally people are, you would lose your citizenship if you claimed it misleadingly. So if the application for naturalisation, for example, was based on fraud, or you became involved in some sort of terrorist activity. And I know with Irish citizenship there are other reasons you need to check in with the embassy, etc., etc. But really they're going 2 or 3 steps beyond that and stripping people of their citizenship.
And they also said, to defend it, is that they wouldn't strip somebody of their citizenship if they're able to get another citizenship. However, it doesn't mean that the person has to have a secondary citizenship at that time. No. They can just get another one. So it actually
they become stateless.
They become stateless until they can apply for their other citizenship, which they may be eligible for. So it doesn't really.
Yet I think the Home Office fact sheet said they would never make anybody's
So
stateless. So
they're contradicting themselves.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get back to them in a second, but just to check in about Ireland, because obviously we're dealing with clients who would arrive in through Dublin Airport as well. So Ireland opened up their border. Effectively visa-free, no requirements attached to those visas, no costs or anything like that. The UK had made concessions around visas, so they waived the cost. They reduced some of the kind of barriers to applying for a normal family visa, like the financial requirement and threshold and all of that. So with our people arriving in Ireland, they would have 90 days to regularise their status. Now, just, I mean, on an international scale, that was there was a huge reaction to that. And the fact that other EU countries have followed suit, or even, at the same time that Ireland announced that they had done the same thing. So UK are really holding off here.
I actually think I seen on Twitter somebody had tweeted MP, I don't know which party they were from, it could have been Conservative, I think, and they asked about routes in. And he gave an example that they could apply to pick fruit in the UK.
I saw
and that could be a route into the UK.
A picking fruit, yeah. So now, in fairness to Priti Patel and her colleagues, they are discussing this as we speak. So who knows what's going to come out in that? And she's bound to feel a massive pressure from the public around this and the media, who really feel that their efforts have been just absolutely abhorrent in response to this crisis. And I mean, you remember them everyone clapped for the nurses in the NHS, but didn't give a pay rise. I heard that being compared to the fact that Westminster was lit up, Downing Street blue and yellow, and solidarity with the Ukraine, etc., etc. But of course, I mean, it's absolute hypocrisy at its finest.
It's a show that they put on.
It
but
really
there's
is.
no action behind it. It's all just for show. It's all just for the newspapers.
And we won't labour the point, but again, I mean, why are we so rightly and justly? This has to be covered by the media, and it deserves its place. This is an awful tragedy, and it's really highlighting how people can wake up one day and just have to flee their home with very little notice. But I mean, this has been happening in Syria, Afghanistan. Horrendous atrocities happening daily in Yemen, and of course Palestine, and now the Ukraine and other parts of the world as well. I mean, the list is endless. But countries are constantly producing refugees in the same way that the Ukraine is now. So yes, I mean, it's close to home. I think we feel it's on the European connection is certainly there, but we can't forget the fact that Afghan refugees who have been promised resettlement to the UK are still waiting.
So that scheme was open to 20,000 Afghan refugees, and 7,000 have been resettled so far. So they haven't fulfilled even half of what they said they were going to do.
And we know for a fact, Jack, that people who have applied under this scheme and were told this is the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme, well, part of it hasn't opened yet, but some have been relocated under various smaller schemes specific to what their background was. Some of them got accepted on paper but are still waiting in Kabul. We've been contacted by a number of families there. So, I mean, that has to be highlighted here, that we can't forget about those cases as well.
There has been criticism, though, of the language used surrounding the Ukrainian crisis in comparison to the Afghan crisis, that there really is significant outrage for the Ukrainians because they're seen as European. And I've seen the language that they're civil. It's a civilized society. It's a European.
How can this happen?
How can this happen? But it doesn't matter what country you're from. They all have to be treated the same. So there is that outrage, and it is starting to come out now in the last number of days. So it's hard to see that they haven't fulfilled this first resettlement scheme. So hopefully that'll get fulfilled.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's just going to continue to happen. But the UN have also criticised the Home Office as well in terms of this bill. And I mean, just what they've said, they've warned that the bill undermines the 1951 Refugee Convention. So just think about this in the context of what they're saying to Ukrainian refugees at the moment. The agreement, which has protected refugees for decades and of which the UK is a signatory. At the same time, if implemented, the policies would risk the lives and well-being of vulnerable people, and the UNHCR believes that this bill would undermine, not promote the government's stated goal of improving protection for those at risk of persecution. So, I mean, That's fairly clear. Other things in the bill, I mean, accelerated detained appeals, abolition of certain appeal rights, notice requirements for removal, so people given 5 days notice when they're going to be removed from the UK, which is all good and well, because previously it was something like, a lot less than that, maybe 2 or 3 days. But it all boils down to the fact that immigration legal aid is absolutely horrendous. And any of the slightly more positive changes in this bill will only work if the legal aid system is improved. And we are currently talking with our colleagues here in Northern Ireland about the horrendous rates, which haven't risen in decades. Decades for legal aid for immigration only, meaning that firms lose their solicitors, they close down certain practices like immigration, for example, or people just don't get into the area because it's not really well paid. What does that mean? Well, it means that hundreds are left without access to legal services, legal advice. We know that some of them are being removed, asylum seekers, are being removed from the north of Ireland over to Scotland without notice. And if they have had a solicitor somewhere along the line, the solicitors aren't receiving notice. So it's an absolute mess here. So really the Home Office need to be looking at their current decision making, making that more efficient, which is an ultimate mess. But getting people, legal aid needs to be completely, brought down and built up again. It's completely inadequate, given the complexity of a lot of these cases as well. It's not just that some solicitor can just pick it up and do it. They can't. It needs to be qualified, experienced people specialising in this. So we're working with our colleagues here to see if there's a way that we can come on board, improve the delivery of our service to people who need to access legal aid. So for me, that's one of the biggest issues that's not being dealt with.
And it's not about putting money in lawyers' pockets. If you increase the fee, it allows other people to come in and work in the area, because some people just aren't able to work. Firms aren't able to have somebody working in the area. So it's not about getting people rich. It's about allowing other people who can come and help to join in, because currently they just can't because of the low fees. Yeah, no, it's disgraceful. It really is. So ultimately, overall, it seems that this bill is just going to entrench existing problems that already exist within the immigration system here across the UK. And people with a legitimate basis to stay in the UK, genuine grounds for fear of removal, can be removed without effective access to justice. So it remains to be seen what they're going to do with this bill in the midst of this close tragedy unfolding in the Ukraine. So anyway, we will definitely bring on solicitors and barristers and legal professionals to speak about this again, but we'll just move on to one of the next things that we were going to look at, which is, unfortunately, this emerging trend. It's back to our very first podcast, isn't it? Back to where it all began. We're here again. So this is very relevant, where we're the trend of attacking and vilifying lawyers. Now, in this respect, we're going to focus on one of our previous guests, who is Colin Harvey. You know Colin Harvey from being a lecturer. And Colin was a fantastic contributor to Activist Lawyer. We just got so much out of his podcast, and dealing with him and communicating with him on a number of events and attending some of his events and his lectures as well. But we've seen... So when we had him on the podcast, it maybe wasn't as bad or maybe underplayed, but he did touch on the fact that he had received a level of kickback. I think that he had said, but Colin has always been clear in his views, but encourages open and transparent debate. And I think that was the main theme of the podcast with him. He is constantly open to discussion, and I think that's so important, and it feels like he's being punished for... So for people who don't really know the background, I guess, who maybe haven't listened to that episode, and I would advise you to do so. Colin is a human rights law professor at Queen's University. Again, we just said he had taught Jack. I had some dealings with him a long time ago, back in the day, but he really works very... he works on constitutional change. He's spoken out about Brexit and the difficulties that creates in terms of equality and human rights here in Ireland and across the UK as well. He really has used his voice to demonstrate how we need collective discussion. He's open to debate. He's never shied away from debate. And on our podcast, he invited
people who disagreed with him to share their view and to give another option of what a new Ireland would look like. So Colin would very often speak at events around this shared vision for a new Ireland that's very inclusive and how we can get to that point. Again, talks a lot about constitutional change and what that would look like on a legal basis. So he uses his skills and his background. And I mean, he's written extensively on the subject. So that's where we're coming from. And of course, we're here in good old Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
So we're back to a bit of, I think, old school bigotry is what I would.
Yeah, and it's
it,
old school, but it's online now.
It's on. You're right. Yeah.
So it's a modern version of it. But we've seen serious criticism. I don't even know, would you call it criticism, or I don't know what the word you would call it for online.
Absolute slurs against his character. By Kate Hoey was one person, a British parliamentarian, and then we had another commentator, Ruth
Dudley Edwards. Yeah.
So, and that's fine, right? They're the people who brought it up, but it wasn't just that; it was the comments underneath.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll not go into the details of that, but basically he was, the recipient of shocking comments and allegations, and really what we're here to talk about is how this is such dangerous territory when academics, human rights lawyers are attacked in this way. I mean, we saw when did we start this podcast? 2020, the end of 2020, when Priti Patel and the rest of the government, not the rest of the government, but members of the government had attacked lawyers, and one lawyer was actually attacked physically, a human rights lawyer, an immigration lawyer, So we can see how this is both at odds with it's undermining the rule of law, but on a personal level, it's absolutely horrendous. So I know the Law Society of Northern Ireland and in the UK, they've spoken up about this. Yeah. And they've condemned this type of attack. It's an attack on his profession, really. Forget about his personal views, whether you agree with him or not, that's neither here nor there. It's an attack on, he's not a practicing solicitor or bar, but he is a legal academic and informs a lot of work that's very important here. So, I mean, for me, I think we were looking back at our first episode, but what really stood out again was Tufik Hussain. I think we may have mentioned him before. He's a solicitor at Duncan Lewis Solicitors. But he said this relentless attack on lawyers who are simply trying their best to represent clients properly and responsibly in difficult circumstances is both callous and dangerous. The Home Secretary knows this, but chooses to press ahead. Upholding the rule of law isn't activism or lefty lawyers frustrating the government. John Locke, the English philosopher, said, "Wherever law ends, tyranny begins. This is where we are heading." Now, I know Colin's a legal academic, but the principle applies across the board. Yeah. So,
and we've seen how important language is from people in power. We've seen a recent one with Keir Starmer, how language from Boris Johnson, a throwaway comment that wasn't dealt with properly, then led to Keir Starmer personally being attacked
again, a lawyer, and because of his profession,
because of him being a lawyer, and it was a complete and utter lie. It wasn't a truthful statement that was thrown out, and you're not allowed to call it a lie, but you're allowed to state the lie, which was quite frustrating. But it led to him being attacked on the street personally based on his profession. So it's important, the language from people in power, again from the first episode which we spoke about.
Yeah, well, thankfully Colin Harvey and other people who do appear to be the recipients of such abuse do have a strong wave of support. They're well able to stand their ground. Thankfully he was, and I mean, we here in this show, this podcast, would support his work, and everybody that we've had on who work so hard to stand up for people, to really strive for equality, human rights, and their work is so valuable to us. So, and we thank them for that.
Yeah.
So
And the problem is with social media, you only see the bad comments. It's only the bad comments on social media, and out of every one bad comment, there's probably 100 people that support him. But It's water off a duck's back.
They went to town on this one. But anyway, we hope to have Colin back. We'd love to have him back on the show. So back to Activist Lawyer Season 3. It sounds so funny.
Season 3.
But again, we'd like to thank our guests last year. It was a bit of a crazy year. I was on maternity and kind of dipping in and out and coming in. I think August was when we started Season 2 last year. But we had just a fantastic response. We really, really did. Particularly what stood out for me as well was Emma Cassidy and Sarah Corrigan from the Pills Network.
It was a great conversation.
It was a great conversation, and they were so fantastic in sharing what we're about. They've been really supportive of the podcast. We'd really like to thank them. And Maria McCluskey, again, who I just mentioned there, was on from the Children's Law Centre NI, and she was somebody who just really highlighted how difficult the job can be. She works with unaccompanied minors, asylum-seeking children. So again, a really great episode to show how difficult that work is. We had, you weren't in for this one, Jack, but I know you were raging that you missed it.
Yeah, had a listen after.
But it was Pádraig O'Murray, who works on incredibly tough cases, and you know, a lot of the legacy cases and difficult cases based in his community in West Belfast. So it was really engaging to see how somebody, you know, lived there, grew up there and worked there, and he's really entrenched in his local community, and he was great at sharing his legal journey. Yeah,
and one of the best podcasts I thought actually out of Season 2 was Rachel Woods. So before I wanted to get into law, I was actually thinking about politics.
Ooh.
And so she's from the Green Party, and she shared some great information about the legislative process in terms of the Assembly. Now, after speaking to her, I definitely don't want to go into politics because it's
Rachel is a tough cookie.
Tough cookie, and it seems like a lot of hard work, but she's well built for it, and she absolutely loves her job. She's
very passionate. But I think it was good for us to have somebody, you know, working on the Justice Committee to come in and talk to us about, well, what happens in the lawmaking process and the legislative process. So I think that was really, really fascinating just to get that perspective.
It was like a background view,
We're all cogs working together in the legal justice system. Yeah. I'm a very tiny cog in that. But Angus Kelly, for me, was just a fantastic guest. Angus was he's the CEO of the Irish Rule of Law International, and I mean, he shared his work in depth, very difficult work, but somebody who travelled the world basically with law, working mostly in criminal justice cases, but he is still so committed and so focused. And he introduced us to Judge Shireen Fisher.
Who massive guest.
A really great guest. Judge Shireen Fisher sits on The Hague. She has a significant experience behind her. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get the chance to go into her work in great detail, but she was there to share the campaign which supports and resettles Afghan women judges. And that was that's still ongoing. So anybody who's interested in that, they want funds, they want support around English language. And I know the Law Society in Ireland, some of the students studying there have been helping the Afghan lawyers, and lots of law firms have been giving them placements. So fantastic work there. And
it's great to see, actually, just from that podcast, I'm still seeing the work that has come off that one episode with Judge Shireen Fisher. You can still see that work.
We're
being
getting
carried
lots
out now.
of emails, and we've people in London as well. Retired barrister, actually my auntie. Shout out to my auntie Betty, who is also getting involved there in hopefully helping Afghan women judges and lawyers who are settling in the UK.
Then we had Mary Kitson. It was a great episode
from the Equality Commission.
So we actually, even after the episode, we spoke to her for 45 minutes to an hour after the episode.
She's the senior solicitor of the Equality Commission, NI, and that episode featured in the Northern Ireland Human Rights Festival, which was fantastic. That was towards the end of last year, so I think it was the 3rd to the 10th of December.
It went on for a week or so, didn't it?
It went on for a week, and we were delighted to be featured, and they're online now. It wasn't in person or anything like that, but the recording was shared widely, and it got a massive response. And Mary was I don't know, an inspiration for anybody who wants to get into that line of work. And she discussed some of her cases that she worked on. And we were actually contacted afterwards by some of the applicants in those matters who were successful, just to say thank you for sharing the podcast. And they were delighted to hear about their case being mentioned. So we were so pleased with that.
Yeah, and then we had Maurice Hutchinson on. So she spoke about the settlements for minors and personal injury claims. And then we also had Megan Burns, which was a solo it was my first solo podcast, I think.
Solo podcast.
Solo podcast. But it was talking
solo.
about cryptocurrency, which and its role in activism and its progressing role in activism. So could be a possible future episode in a year.
I
or two.
loved that podcast because I knew nothing about it.
Well, I still know nothing about it.
Yeah, and you know Megan though, don't you?
I know Megan.
Well.
Yeah, pretty well.
So
And
Megan is our go-to cryptocurrency
Yeah.
person. So she's still studying
doing her masters now in
Yeah.
law and technology, and I think her dissertation is going to be again on cryptocurrency, and I think it's got something to do with activism again. So could possibly, once that's finished, we could have her on again and see what the
Brilliant.
developments have been in that.
These young minds. Well, we finished off last year by having Dr. Louise Crowley on, and I am just a massive admirer of her. It was probably a bit of a fangirl on that episode. It was I was a bit cringe. But Louise works on, so much. She's a family law solicitor is her background, and she published widely on domestic violence, violence against women, and of course what we spoke about, which I'm slightly obsessed with, which is the bystander intervention program in UCC. And I think it's just fantastic initiative of getting the conversation started around sexual harassment, the culture of kind of language and harassment for people in third level education. We all agree this should be started at an earlier age.
Yep.
Louise would agree that, but just to see the rollout of the programme with Louise and her colleagues is just fantastic.
Education and talking about its key.
Well, bystander, I mean, it's, equipping people with the tools to stand up for somebody and to know when enough's enough and to step in and to stop matters getting out of control. So we will revisit some of these themes this season, but we have so much more to come, and we look forward to sharing with you a host of solicitors coming up, barristers, a few legal academics,
And
activists
activists,
as well.
Yeah, so season 3, it starts off with this episode, and then we move on.
This is the boring one.
This is the boring one. This is to get everyone, engaged again. But so we focus on, with the first episode, we focus on violence against women coming from a criminal justice analysis and preventive measures and awareness. So we had, we're going to have Stop Street Harassment NI. So it'll be a great podcast with Hannah and Kristen, who are both lawyers and the founders of a fantastic organisation carrying out timely work here in Northern Ireland.
And then we have Dr. Rachel Killeen from Queen's University Belfast, who, again, we're going to be looking at harassment and violence against women, but she will be speaking about the criminal aspect of that and the trial, and one of her publications focuses on sexual harassment on trial. So that'll be really interesting to get her perspective. And we just think it's just such an important matter to keep on the table, and I think we will discuss it here on Activist Lawyer as much as we can, because we know in Ireland and Northern Ireland now they're talking about the whole violence against women strategy, which did the consultation close for that, Jack?
I think it's in March. It's closing
March, some date in March. We'll check that out.
I think it was extended.
It was extended slightly.
I think it's closing in March.
So that's on the table, and we think that's extremely important, given that we had so many guests on who talked about harassment, violence against women, and the real need for it. We didn't discuss the case of Aisling Murphy. I'm sure everybody knows what happened. It was a horrendous case in the south of a teacher who was brutally and tragically murdered. So, again, the conversation arose and the debate around violence against women and what we can do to stop this. So we think for us and for our guests and for listeners, it's important to keep that on the table. So you will see that coming up. But we also have, Kieran Moyna, who is a solicitor in Phoenix Law. We're really looking forward to having him on. He was involved in the Asher's Bakery case. Yeah.
So it'll be a really, really good podcast. And then we have Emma McElveen, an extraordinarily active barrister specialising in employment law. And we have Katie Mannion, solicitor with the Irish Refugee Council, as well as a criminal defence solicitor, Owen O'Sullivan, and a few more special guests on the way. So it'll be, I think season 3 will be the best season so
We've
far.
a few yet to confirm, but we really hope they do, because we'd love to have them on. Owen O'Sullivan will be great because he works with KOD Lions, and we had one of our best podcasts was with Stephen Kerwin, who is a real friend to the show, and we're really excited to have that fantastic mix of guests. So what else do we have coming up then?
So we actually I want to give a thanks to everyone who has contributed to our blogs. We have another couple coming up. They're just finishing off their blogs, so they'll be posted on the website.
Is this mainly students?
This is mainly this is from students. So we had a great article from Antonia Borman on citizenship. So we actually specifically love that one because of immigration, and we have a few more lined up. So we actually have 2 more that'll be coming out soon on the website. So keep an eye out for those.
And we're really excited because we have a few plans for the year ahead. We can't share them all here.
No, secret.
But we have some good news. We are developing our website, so stay focused for that. We're going to, make it look a bit more swanky, sophisticated.
Yeah, and more social media posts as
more
well.
More interactive and all of that. So we have a little bit of help with that now, which is fantastic as well. And our lovely Jessica, who is over in Canada, but still working with us, great remote work. It's just fantastic.
The new world,
Yeah, I'm always afraid I'm waking her up at night time. But she is still working closely with Activist Lawyer, and she's appeared on the show a few times. Appeared, what we say. Yeah, she did. Appeared on the show a few times. So we were also told recently that our podcast, or a couple of series of it at least, episodes, were recommended reading in a well-known school of law. I don't know how much we can say, but when I heard that, I was very pleased.
To be honest, if I was given that to do for my reading list, I'd do that. And I didn't do much reading now for my reading list, but I'd listen to podcasts.
Would you? God, those poor students. Well, I hope it's not our single episodes, Jack, and it's just because there's exciting and interesting guests on it. But we are also, this is big news, hoping to we are profiling our guests in the Irish legal news. So listen in and check us out on all our social media.
That's where you'll get all the updates.
You'll get it, and our guests will be able to give a little bit of a written profile about themselves to accompany the podcast. So we're so excited about that.
Yep, so check out our Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn because we want to hear all of your thoughts, views and ideas. So send them through either on social media or check out our website, and you can send us a wee email. So yeah. And
all those links will be attached to this episode.
Oh yeah, attached, everything ready to go. So hit us up if you want to talk about a specific topic. I feel down with the kids.
You're just down with the kids.
So hip.
Yeah, you usually say that about me.
Yeah,
so that's the cringe.
Good.
But okay, well, thank you. We'll not bore you anymore with our idle chat, and thank you again for tuning in, for everybody for supporting us, and we really look forward to an exciting season 3 of Activist Lawyer here at Granite Podcast Studio in the heart of Newry City.